Live from San Francisco, California, extracting the signal from the noise, it's theCUBE, covering DockerCon 2015. Brought to you by SiliconANGLE Media, with special thanks to Docker. Now your hosts, John Furrier and Jeff Frick.
Okay, welcome back everyone, live in San Francisco here at DockerCon 2015, SiliconANGLE's theCUBE, our flagship program. We go out to the events and extract the signal from the noise. We're halfway through the year. I think we have, Jeff, 40 events under our belt. I'm John Furrier, my host Jeff Frick, and we have our next guest, CUBE alumni and venture capitalist at Greylock, Jerry Chen, former cloud guy at VMware, investor in Docker, his first investment, looking good off the tee. Welcome back to theCUBE.
Hey guys, it's great to be back as always.
Yeah, we are obviously always talk about your first investment, Docker. Now you got a few more investments under your belt, but you were making bets cloud early. Cloud has now crossed over, right? I mean, it's no brainer. Amazon numbers are released now. They've broken out. They say 7 billion. We're Dave Vellante and I expect it might be more like 10 billion, if not more.
Yep.
Huge ramp.
Yep. No
No race to zero. Certainly some commoditization, but value shifting. Oracle's releasing numbers at a Larry Ellison event yesterday. Their business is booming.
Yep.
So, there's not a race to zero going on. So there is value in those hills.
Sure.
Right?
It's like I always say, you always want to ride a wave bigger than you, right? So you're going to fight Oracle in the database market. In your cloud era, you ride the big data wave. If you're going to fight Oracle's old business or Microsoft or even VMware, you ride the cloud wave. So you look at the SaaS companies like Salesforce.com, Workday, ServiceNow. How do you fight the previous generation? You ride a wave bigger than your opponents, and that's going to be the cloud wave. And so I think what you're seeing is the sea change of how IT is done. And when I say how IT is done, I mean how it's purchased, how it's used, how applications are built, how it's deployed. And I think Docker, as you see around you, is really at the center of a lot of this transformation.
We had John Willis on earlier, whose company was bought by Docker, great guy,
Yep.
just rolling on, just great plutonium in between the cube. But there's a moment in time now, I think we're BC, okay, before cloud.
Sure.
Okay, and he made a great point. He said Amazon came out, just to say 7 years ago, just because a 7-year itch is a good thing to look at. So 7 years of learning.
Yeah.
Okay, now people are figuring it out.
Yeah.
You were one of those folks who was in there looking at investments post VMware. Obviously VMware had visibility into the enterprise. So we're 7 years in. People are figuring it out. Cloud is the way. The underlying infrastructure is changing. What is that? Because when the infrastructure has radical changes like this, there's huge disruption.
So I've talked about this in the past. It's something I call it DDI, Developer-Defined Infrastructure. So you look at these waves, and kind of the 80s and 90s, you had physical defined infrastructure. You were dominated by the big system guys like Sun, DEC, Digital, right? We debated CPU architectures. And then you had kind of software-defined infrastructure, where you separated the logical from the physical. Operating systems, Red Hat, Microsoft, they all took off. VMware was kind of pinnacle of that software-defined world. But what happens is when you define infrastructure and software, you can program it, you make it portable. And that's the beauty of this cloud wave, what I call DDIs. Now, to your point is, every piece of infrastructure from storage to networking to compute has an API, right? And AWS was an early trend where S3, EBS, EC2 had API. And as
building blocks, too.
As building blocks. Exactly, the Lego
Not
blocks.
monolithic.
Monolithic building blocks, every little building block has its own API, and just like Docker really is the API for this unit of the cloud, enables developers to define how they want to build their applications, how to network them, as Will's talked about, and how you want to secure them, how you want to store them. And so the beauty of this generation is now developers are determining how apps are built, not just at the end user or iPhone app layer, the data layer, the storage layer, the networking layer. So every single level is being disrupted by this concept of DDI, and where how you build, use, and actually purchase IT has changed. And you're seeing the incumbent vendors like Oracle, VMware, Microsoft try to react, but you're seeing a whole new generation of startups.
So I got to ask you, I love this developer-driven infrastructure. It's basically software-defined, software-led. Everything's about software, but software consistency is key.
Yeah.
I'm a big bank, and I buy drives from XYZ or servers from server Z over there, or server Y and XYZ. They have different code bases. They're BC, they're before cloud. What's going to be 2 years? Everyone's rewriting their code, right? So there's a dilemma. So the question is, developers and DevOps assume abstraction from hardware.
Yep.
So there's a lot of hardware vendors out there. Oracle says we're going to engineer our hardware for Oracle.
Sure.
That's great for Oracle.
Sure.
But what about the software community out there now? What's their choice?
So I think you're seeing that pendulum of like engineer systems, like Sun, Oracle, full stack versus best of breed software elements. I think what you're seeing is this this third wave, or third way rather, in this called developer defined infrastructure. Before, you think about it, the same architecture, your x86 plus Windows and Linux ran everything from a web server to your email app, right? The same more or less components. But now all of a sudden you have what I call metal to the management, metal to the pixel. These cloud applications, these cloud vendors are at scale where you can actually build servers, systems, operating systems for purpose-built functions. It could be big data, like Hadoop, right? It could be photo archiving your Facebook. So you look at the web giants, Google, Facebook, they build whole data centers to the dirt, right? Cooling, power, optimized for a single type of application. So what I believe is the third way of this new infrastructure is you have best-of-breed software, mostly open source like Docker. Then you can actually engineer your systems for the type of application you want to run. And look at Intel's participation with Cloudera and the Hadoop community. They believe that big data applications engineered around their architecture will drive a whole bunch of usage of new server units. So I think you're seeing this third way evolve.
I think it's an opportunity. I mean, you see the success of, say, a Nirvanix out there.
Yep.
You're seeing the hardware guys who were young and smart and look at the integrated stuff saying, hey, you know what? If I align, it's not just about running great on VMware anymore.
Sure.
It's about running great on everything.
Sure.
Right? So there's going to be an opportunity for the HPs, for the IBMs, and the Dells, and the Pure Storages, and the EMCs out there. So those guys are the one spectrum of the metal, or end-to-end. So on the end-to-end, what's your take on that piece? End-to-end architecture, software running across... for performance reasons.
For performance reasons, there are, like I say, I think within certain functions, there's room for end-to-end. So Pure Storage is a great example, right? They've architected all flash array with proprietary software around how to store and dedupe your data, and they're just killing it, right? They are taking market share away from the incumbent vendors, and they're probably the best kind of tier one storage solution out there, end-to-end for storage. With that said, on top of Pure Storage, they support VMware virtualization. They're going to support containers. They support databases, open source, closed source. So they've engineered something in their world end-to-end that far exceeds in price, performance, any incumbent. But they're still enabling your selection of technology above their stack.
So this is where Docker kind of comes in, because you just brought up a good point. Pure is a great example. I mean, they're a storage-only vendor, but they have hardware. But their software vision is compatible with what the world's moving to, with kind of DevOps. And explain that for the folks out there. Like, there's this whole enablement piece, so you can survive in a hardware world, if you will, if there's a good software model.
Sure. I think the enablement is the right word, right? So I think the vendors who enable choice from the developer point of view, the application architecture point of view, enable choice will win and thrive. Right, the vendors that restrict choice, saying you have to use our system, our hardware, our software, those guys will probably find some relevance in their installed base, but I wouldn't bet on them in the long run, right? I think that world is slowly receding, and the ability to enable choice at every layer of the stack is kind of where developers are going to.
So are we in 1 BC or 0 BC before cloud? Would you make this year the flashpoint? Last year, or is it not yet here?
I would say, I like to say 2015 is the beginning of the developer-defined infrastructure age, right? That, this year going forward, for the next 15, 20 years, kind of the beginning of this new generation, how you think about developers, operations, applications. And everything before this was, hey, we're enabling everything in software, and that's great, because that whole enablement of software and separating the physical and logical, and that flexibility was useful. But again, if you're a developer, the true power of software and software-defined infrastructure is programmability and portability, right? I can now program my hardware like I do like my calculator, my computer, and that's beautiful, right? Because you can all of a sudden reduce costs, increase speed, like the networking stuff we were talking about earlier. Now that your software is programmable and developer-defined, the agility around networking just goes through the roof.
So your cohorts at VMware, Steve Herod, Pete Sonsini, yourself, all ex-VMware guys, are kind of this new school. So what are you investing in? Because you guys are all making pretty good bets right now. Steve's looking good. Pete's got the Cal connection.
Yeah.
He's in Databricks and a bunch of other deals he's got going on. You've got Docker. You're at Greylock. All tier 1 VCs, all kind of sharp, focused on this new generation.
Yeah.
What is your investment thesis today? Obviously, data-driven infrastructure. We heard that. What are you looking for? You're always out and pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
Pressing the flesh.
It's
getting deals. What's hot for you right now?
You make it sound so easy. So for sure, in the DDI world, there's a bunch of stuff we talked about, I'm thinking about. But likewise in the data layer, right? So Greylock's invested in Cloudera, we're investors in Delphix, we're invested in Sumo Logic and Trifacta. So we spent a lot of time in the data space, and we've been super fortunate to be invested in generational apps like Workday, LinkedIn, Facebook on the consumer side. And so for sure, I'm looking at two other areas. One, it's another generation of SaaS applications. Like, again, what's the next generation of CRM? What's the next generation of Salesforce? Next generation of SAP, or any of those apps out there? Because what's transforming those guys, again, you got to ride a wave bigger than you. The cloud wave has come, right? So they're being disruptive. But data mobility are also transforming how I think about these next generation applications. So I'm spending a lot of time on how data and analytics at that data tier will transform your enterprise applications. Could be ERP, could be CRM, could be anything and above.
So you've been a couple of years in as a VC. Certainly, Greylock's a great firm. At VMware, you're on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
You're in the industry, so you got had a lot of experience. What's your advice to the entrepreneurs out there? Because a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of hype in the blogs, and usually people are reading press releases. I should be doing this. There's always that fear of an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Am I doing the right thing? What should I be betting on? Where's my validation? Because usually heads down.
Yeah.
In this world of this new order, the new cloud, what's your advice to them in terms of staying the course?
Sure.
You've seen success and other companies out there succeed and some fail. You've seen a lot of deal flow. What could you advise for entrepreneurs?
So the highest level, again, pick a wave bigger than you, bigger than your opponents. Right. So if you pick the Docker wave, container wave, you're going to do well, because this is inevitably going to be how applications are built going forward. So pick a mobile wave, right? So if you're like Facebook or finding Google, you pick the social wave. Your Instagram and photos trying to fight Facebook and photos, you do the mobile first wave. So pick a wave bigger than you. Number one. Number two is
a trend, not so much a category.
Not a category, a trend, right? And you can argue security is a trend now because there's always going to be bad guys at your front door, so that's an inevitable place to invest in. Number one, so pick a trend that's going to be larger, more powerful than your incumbents, because they have a hard time changing on a dime. So pick a trend, a way that's counter to what the incumbent's going to do. Number two, especially on the enterprise side, I always say this. It doesn't matter if you're the fourth or fifth best thing they've seen all day. They're only going to have budget for one or two things. So how do you make sure that the one thing you're selling hits their top, to-do list in terms of priorities? Because if you don't have time or budget for 20 things in a year, how do they make sure they're going to spend money on whatever they're selling? And the third thing is always, we spend a lot of time on the technology and the product. We don't spend enough time to think about how to get the products into the hands of our customers. So distribution is key, right? And
onto a solution map that's pinpoint.
Well, yeah. How do you reach the buyers? And my partner Neil likes to say, in the battle between your startup versus your incumbent is the battle between technology and distribution. The startups have better technology. The incumbents, have better distribution, install base of customers, a sales force, a channel. So how fast can the startup build distribution, a channel, route to market, partnerships, open source adoption and love, versus how fast can the incumbents buy or build that technology? And that's the race. And that's why I have a job. It's like, let's bet on great technology, but let's also think about what are the one or two or three things we need to do to enable us to get that product to market, right? Is that direct sales? Is that open source? Is that partnerships? Is that OEMs? And there's no magic bullet there, but for the entrepreneur out there, let's be thoughtful about how to sell it as well.
But there are so many options on distribution, because distribution used to be such a hard barrier to breach. It was such a lock-in.
Correct.
And look no further than Shadow IT and Amazon and Atlassian is down the road. They had the greatest thing I think ever. John, you spend $10, it goes to to schools in Africa and you get 10 seats. I mean, they got into everywhere with that model.
The land and expand works.
It's really interesting how that distribution barrier is just not. Look in publishing. I mean, you had to have somebody printing your papers and a bunch of guys throwing it on curbs every day, right?
And I think there's not one, to your point, Jeff, there's not one path to heaven, right? So I call this the unit value. Depending on what you're selling, you got to pick the right channel, the right pricing. So if you're selling something like ERP software, or the unit value, sell the whole company, right? Or you're selling big data or like Hadoop distribution, you're selling like large systems, a lot of software for a lot of data. So that you got large unit value, price enough, get the right direct sales force. If you're selling something like that's an individual developer, Atlassian, right, Slack, or considered by Dropbox, where one person can use it, then your unit of distribution, your unit value is smaller, so you can distribute through open source, via the web, through the App Store for some of these consumer apps. And then the question becomes, are your economics right? And how do you scale it from small to big? And it's something like a Docker, the unit value can be very small because you get value from a single laptop, a single container. But what you saw today with Project Orca and the Trusted Registry, you saw how they're taking that small unit value, a single container, putting them together, saying, hey, look at Swarm, look at Compose, look at Orchestrate, look at Project Orca. We're going to add value from the small to the big. And I just love that because I think they're unlocking value all along the way from the small developer to the large enterprise. And if you can do that, you're going to build something very special.
And they're also eliminating friction in the growth.
Correct.
So it's really a double win.
It's a smooth path. And if you can make that frictionless, unlock that path, then there's a lot of value you're going to create.
All right, here's a question for you. So entrepreneurs always, sometimes the ones that are nervous and don't have imperfect information, sometimes zig when they should zag. Mm-hmm. So what's your advice to them and to when not to, sometimes the best move is not to move, stay on the course, trust your gut. We've heard that advice many times from many folks, but a lot of times there's always infighting amongst teams. When should I zig? When should I zag? What's your take on that? What's your advice when you're on the boards of these companies, or just in general? What's your philosophy?
There is no right answer to zig or zag, when or what. When do you do and when you don't? I mean, sometimes when you zig or you pivot, like a cloud to Docker, you unlock something that wasn't there before. Sometimes staying the course and being patient, having a vision. Like Reid Hoffman, when he started LinkedIn, he had a vision of what he wanted to build LinkedIn into, and he stayed the course for 5, 6, 7 years. He knew exactly
he could smell the opportunity. He
knew it. He had that fundamental insight of where he wanted to go. You look at folks like the Airbnb folks, they knew exactly what they wanted to do from the very beginning. Pure Storage, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. Cloudera, they knew what they wanted to do. So in some cases, you stay the course despite the market dynamics, the competitive dynamics. In some cases, you need to be agile and nimble. And so I think the question is not do you zig and zag, or do you never, or when do you do it, is what signals do you need to watch? And I think the great entrepreneurs and the great investors and board members can help by saying, okay, we've seen this story play out, we can pattern match, let's stay the course because we understand what's real here, because we're creating real value, or we're creating a deep competitive moat, or saying, you know what, we've seen this before, we're reading the tea leaves, this doesn't seem right, we should kind of move over to something else.
Sometimes you can connect the dots and see that. Good advice. Okay, what are you excited about this show? What's going on here for you? Obviously, you proud Papa with the investment in Docker. The team's amazing. Solomon was on earlier. You saw that.
Solomon's great.
And he says it's about peace and love. It's not about war and destruction. It's a really happy community. I mean, what's your takeaway? What are you excited about for here at DockerCon this year?
Well, I mean, I think the top line is just the growth, and not just the conference, but the customers, the partners, the users. I mean, you guys see this every conference, right? I'm sure not just DockerCon, but almost every other conference you go to, people talk about Docker, right? And from the operating system application. Number one, the usage and the growth of the technology has really crossed the chasm, leaped the hurdle, whatever metaphor, analogy, cliche you want to use, way faster than expected. So number one, the growth out there, it just makes me excited, because I know and I believe when you have that kind of growth, there's opportunity. There's opportunity for Docker, there's opportunity for every one of these other vendors, other companies, companies that are here, because when you have that kind of growth in the market, there creates opportunity, right?
What about the money making? Because obviously you're an investor, you want to get
Absolutely.
liquid. Obviously, there's a nice private equity market going on now for public, so maybe you can take a little bit off the table. But in general, Docker has to make some business model decisions.
Sure.
Not now, down the road. What's your signals that you're looking for kind of the business models, when to monetize, how to look at the value opportunities?
Well, I think what you're seeing here this morning in the keynotes, two areas that they're looking at monetizing. And first and foremost, you see them talk about Docker Trusted Registry, right? So Docker Hub, Docker Hub Enterprise, the hosted version, a private cloud version of Docker Trusted Registry, starting to monetize kind of the core concept of collecting, managing, deploying your Docker containers inside and outside the enterprise. So that's, I think, the first step. And then I think what we saw in the keynote is this Project Orca, which is basically putting Docker as a platform. And Docker really is a platform. You look at the runtime itself, the container format itself, Project Swarm, or the Swarm project for orchestration and deployment. So if you look at Swarm and Docker, Compose, all those open source projects collected together, Docker really becomes this cloud platform. And they saw with Project Orca, they're announcing how they're going to basically, put a bunch of these components together and make it this, I think, an incredible system, incredible platform for build, ship, and running your applications. All
right, final question. We're getting out of time here. Tell the folks who are watching what's happening at the show. What's the vibe? What are they missing by not being here?
So first and foremost, if you're not here, number one is the optimism and energy, right? It reminds me of just so many great communities I've been lucky to be part of. That the energy, the interest of every developer, every customer, right? And normally I think customers versus developers, and vendor versus customers, they have this antagonistic, like, hey, why are you charging me? But this conference right now, if you're not here, that optimism between all the parties involved is pretty amazing. And so I think for me, that's the best thing about being part of communities. It's why I'm a venture capitalist, right? It's why I love to be around entrepreneurs, is that limitless fountain of brilliant insights, but that optimism with these CEOs and entrepreneurs I
it's
deal
a
with.
wealth creating opportunity, innovation here.
You look at Solomon. He's the most optimistic person in the room, in the planet, because he only sees the potential of where things can go. And I just feel lucky to be around guys like that.
Jerry Chen from Greylock here inside theCUBE, sharing his thoughts, commentary, vision, his investment thesis, and advice for entrepreneurs here inside theCUBE, live in San Francisco. We'll be right back with more coverage after this short break.